Joe Biden, I think, did everything he had to do at the State of the Union, everything that was immediately necessary for him to do for his chances going into the next election. That doesn't mean he didn't do everything that he did everything perfectly. That doesn't mean I didn't wish he took more aggressive positions on things like public housing or marijuana legalization or other things. I could spend a lot of time going into that. But when it came to the main things that people were talking about going into this, a mental acuity, sharpness, can he handle the stress of the job? Is age wearing him down? Can he be, how is he going to handle this type of pressure? Because he's going to have people like Marjorie Taylor Greene throwing insults at him. I think he did quite well under the pressure. He sparred with the crowd. He had witty combats. Many of them were probably practice, some of which, at least from my impression, were organic, probably a combination of both. He was able to keep himself energetic for well over 2 hours. And now he's speaking today as well at a location in suburban Pennsylvania, giving another speech that hits on many of the same themes. And another thing that I really, really appreciated about the speech is that Biden went into a positive vision. Now, again, I wish the positive vision was further. I wish he talked about, like I said, again, marijuana legalization, massive expansion of the public housing, talking about, because this is something that I don't think has been addressed enough, this campaign, a push to put forward that public option that he promised he would on the campaign trail in 2022 if he had the majority, or that he wanted to pursue that. But he put forward a positive vision. He put forward an idea, and he said this multiple times. If you give me the Congress, these are the things I will do. I will try to enshrine Roe versus Wade on the federal level. And speaking of Roe versus Wade, he also went pretty hard on IVF, which I appreciate him doing that, because his argument, and the argument of many Democrats before Roe v. Wade was overturned, is that overturning Roe v. Wade would open the floodgates. It would lead to the Wild West, where local courts and local legislators would go crazy trying to see all the different ways they can try to limit a woman's right to choose and control her bodily autonomy. And what would you know it? Not only did this go far, this went further than I think even most evangelicals expected. In fact, most evangelicals support IVF. 88% of Americans support IVF. The Republicans, whether purposefully or not purposefully, if you listen to people like Michael Knowles, they're in favor of court decisions like the one in Alabama. They want decisions like that in other states as well. They want to go after IVF, but this is an unpopular position that he needs to hammer them on. And the assumption that this is going to stop at Alabama, I think is, naive. And it was good that he took time to concentrate on that. And I think him bringing a guest to the State of the Union who has experience with this, who, because of this court decision, and he did bring a woman who had to stop IVF treatment because of the Alabama court decision, who had to leave the state of Alabama. And he also was talking about rape, and I think the abortion section of his debate was quite good. He talked about unions, which I thought was good as well. I didn't expect him to focus much on that, but he did get to focus a little bit on that. I think from outside of the fact that I want to focus on being more assertive in the agenda going further, I think that when it comes to mental acuity and sharpness, he succeeded. I think he had a positive vision, which I was nervous about, and I think he succeeded on that front. And I think he was able to deal with the heckling, which I thought was going to be a problem, and everybody knew was probably going to be a problem, even if Mike Johnson called for, tranquility and everybody be cordial. It happened. He did fumble a bit, but even if that's the area where he fumbled the most, I don't think it looked that bad, because while he was fumbling as they were screeching, they were, screeching. And I do need to point out about interruptions. This moment where Joe Biden sees Marjorie Taylor Greene's outfit for the first time, because she decided not to come in a suit. She decided to come dressed up in full campaign MAGA gear, MAGA hat, MAGA jacket, covered in buttons. She looked like she was, like she had a clipboard at a Trump rally and was ready to get you signed up for the movement. Not really, at the State of the Union. Check this out. Dude, she's unironically, it looks like she's, if you look at her, you see how her mouth clenches up like that? Do you think she was going to laugh? Do you think the president roasted her so hard there that she was going to laugh here and she had to turn away in order to not laugh because of the president's reaction? Because she's just so unused to seeing the president be like, I don't know, have this personality or not just be like, you're a dingbat. I don't know. He treated her kind of like a little kid. Yeah, like as you said in chat, he treated her kind of like a little kid. Now, when it comes to the sharpness, I think he did well. When it comes to a positive vision, I think he did better than I expected. I think he dealt with the jousting in the crowd relatively well. That doesn't mean that Joe Biden, though, was necessarily perfect. There was times where he still fumbled. And there was times where I feel like he sped up going through his words and the full message didn't really get out. And he did let them derail the speech a little too much, in my opinion. But I think for what the Biden team wanted this speech to be, that it succeeded at that, even if I would want it to be more. I don't know if you guys want me to give it like a letter grade. B- might be where I'm leaning towards in my mind, knowing what they're trying to aim for. But I also need to say, outside of like my own personal rating, what I personally think of the speech, because again, I could go on and on about different policy disagreements I might have on the specifics, how the nation reacted is much more important. And the State of the Union fueled Biden's biggest fundraising day of the entire campaign as Biden continues to outpace Trump in fundraising. And if you check the hour by hour fundraising, he peaks at 9 p.m. He starts the State of the Union around 9:22, 9:23, 9:24. At 10 p.m., he breaks it again, and then he breaks it again at 11 p.m. So as people continued to watch the speech and continued to hear what the president had to say, they were signing up at the Joe Biden website, hitting the donate button, dropping $20, dropping $25, dropping $50 as he made the speech. Let's read a little bit of this. President Biden's State of the Union address fueled his campaign's most lucrative fundraising day since he launched his bid for re-election, according to the campaign officials. In what may have been the most important speech of his presidency, Biden delivered a fiery performance the Democrats hope will make a turning point in his re-election campaign. With anger, humor, and frequent ad-libs that baited his Republican critics, the 81-year-old seized on the stakes of the high-profile address to try to assure voters concerned about his age. Biden outlined his priorities on the economy, foreign aid, spread blame for the border crisis, and took repeated swipes at his presidency without mentioning former Trump by name. I think he mentioned him about 14 times. Now, I also want to throw out there, before we move on and talk about other responses to this speech, that I do appreciate, and I have to mention this, that he started with the Ukraine segment and then moved into everything else. Because as people are tuning in at 9:22 p.m., it was supposed to start at 9, and I thought already that was a little late, but then he didn't get really started until 9:22 as he's walking in, shaking everybody's hands, like side commentary, before he actually got started. Who's going to watch until like 11:30 on a school night, on a work night? I think a lot of people are going to go to bed. And so a lot of Americans are not going to watch this whole thing. They're only going to watch the first 30 minutes, get an impression, then watch the clips the next day. So him starting in the first 10 to 15 minutes, where I'm not going to say we know for sure the most people are watching, but almost certainly the most people are watching because people are starting to go to bed. I do appreciate that. I do appreciate him starting with that. I do also appreciate that at every possible moment during the speech, Mike Johnson looked incredibly constipated and like he was terrified to clap. I think he clapped a few times during it, but it felt he was doing this like weird head bobbing the entire time. Like he was listening to a beat on his own drum or something. Like he was listening to a song in his head. I didn't know what was going on with him. Anyway, I also want to show you guys the reaction from Republicans. Joe Biden makes this speech. They were waiting for him to fumble, waiting for him to stumble, waiting for him to, quote unquote, collapse on stage verbally. And it didn't happen. They tried their best. They pressured him. They heckled him. They screeched like banshees and baboons, but it didn't work. And so instead of him being an incompetent, dementia-riddled freak, who's stumbling and fumbling and stuttering every word out, Joe Biden actually is an extremist. He's radical. He's angry. He's bitter. He's going after his opponents. I like how he's both like all-powerful, angry, aggressive, and coming after his opponents. You must fear him, while also being dementia-riddled and unable to do anything.
Look, I think tonight was astonishing. I've never seen anything like it. It was a campaign speech, but it was an exceptionally bad campaign speech. Joe Biden was angry. He was bitter. He was screaming, as you noted, the entire night. He was radical and extreme. and he was completely out of touch with the American people. Frankly,
Out of touch.
Tonight, Joe Biden reminded me like
I'm sure that the Republicans watching on as he talks about IFV and Roe versus Wade being overturned and his want for maternity leave and all these issues, or how the Republicans had to jeer again when he talked about their record of trying to go after Social Security, go talk about Ted Cruz's record about going after Social Security. And that was uncomfortable. That was very uncomfortable. I understand that, but I that might not be your priorities, but many of them are American priorities.
like an angry old man standing on his porch screaming to the kids, "Get off!"
What I really appreciate about the speech is I don't think he'd spent any time. I spent a little time with like flowery words, but he didn't spend time on issues that I felt were like fluff. He didn't spend time like, you know, when Putin invaded Ukraine, he took a section of his speech, a tiny section, but like a few sentences, to talk about J.K. Rowling and Harry Potter. I'm happy that the speech didn't devolve into that.
The kids, "Get off my lawn." That's who he was. I've been to 12 State of the Union addresses. I've never seen anything remotely like this.
And see, there's no way for him to win. If he was quiet, soft-spoken, it's like, oh, he's just an old man. Yelling and passionate, it's like, he's a crotchety old man. There's no way to win. Another one that I thought was good was that Sean Hannity just suggested that he was on like cocaine or something.
First of all, let's get your reaction. I just compared Joe Biden on a regular basis, regular Joe, day-to-day Joe, and we saw a very different Joe Biden tonight, very angry, very jacked up, you might say, maybe charitably over-caffeinated would be a way to put it. What was your reaction to that? Was that surprising to you?
Look, I don't think it's that crazy to think that his staffers told him, and if you've been watching recent Joe Biden speeches, he's manhandling the press a lot more, not literally, but figuratively. And in his press conferences, he's trying to be more assertive because he understands that there is a perception of him as a dawdling old man who's slowing down with time. And he's like, oh, okay, well, if people have that, then I'll raise my voice and I'll make sure that they know that I'm still here, I'm still assertive. That was the goal of the speech. And I do think that goal was achieved. Now, I do want to say that a lot of people are talking about this data right here. And this data is good. This is good data, but I need to give this more context. CNN poll, more than 6 in 10 State of the Union viewers, it was like 64%, had a positive reaction to Biden's speech. More than 6 in 10 Americans who watched President Joe Biden's State of the Union address had a positive reaction to the speech, according to a CNN poll conducted by SSRS, with a smaller 35% reacting very positively. The pattern of widespread but tempered positivity mirrors the reception for Biden's speeches in previous years. Last year, 72% of viewers reacted positively, with 34% saying the reaction was very positive. The lowest very positive number in CNN's polling dates back to 1998. In 2022, 71% had a positive reaction, with 41% saying it was very positive. That was during Bill Clinton's 1998 State of the Union address. So 6 out of 10 is good, but when you consider this in a historical context, 6 out of 10 isn't fantastic. It isn't a knockout of the park. It's good. It means the majority of the people who watched this speech came away saying, oh, that was a good speech. I think Biden is taking the country in the right direction. In fact, if you check the people who watched the speech, those afterwards, there's like an over double-digit jump of people who think the country is being taken in the quote-unquote right direction. So yeah, it did have an impact. But historically, whether you're comparing it to Bill Clinton's 1998 State of the Union, whether you're comparing it to George W. Bush's 2007 State of the Union, this is not numbers that are knocking out of the park. In fact, historically, presidents get a good, positive reception for their State of the Union address. President Bill Clinton in 1998, even though it was a quote-unquote lower State of the Union address, it was like, oh, wasn't one that was it wasn't like an extremely great State of the Union. That still had one second. I'm trying to see. Can we go check out the 1998 State? You know what? Let's not derail. But if you check these old State of the Union addresses where it's on the lower end, they're still largely positive. And Joe Biden isn't knocking it out of the park. So it's okay. But for people like you know, my good friends who were saying, oh, I think Biden just won. I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. In fact, I think this Washington Post article breaks down some of the historical comparisons when we look at the polling data. Biden's campaigns and media outlets have pointed to a post-speech instant CNN poll showing 65% of viewers offered a positive view of Joe Biden's speech. Viewers also shifted 17 points. I was wrong about 14. It's larger. 17 points towards believing the country's heading in the right direction, from 45% before the speech to 62% afterwards. Both of these are true. What is also true is that the State of the Union speeches almost always receive strongly favorable views, in part because viewership trends tend to draw disproportionately from their allies. So if you have a Democrat doing a State of the Union, more Democrats tune in. If you have a Republican State of the Union, on average, more Republicans tune in. The 65% who had a positive view of the speech was actually lower than any speech CNN has polled in the past quarter century. The previous low being Donald Trump's 2018 address with 70%. And the 35% who offered a very positive view was effectively tied with Biden's speech last year, 34% for the lowest on record. The next lowest were Biden's 2022 speech and George W. Bush's 2007 speech, which earned very positive marks from 41% of viewers. The 17-point shift towards the country moving in the right direction was also unremarkable, historically speaking. Dating back to Bill Clinton's 1998 State of the Union address, viewers had shifted an average of 15 points towards the optimistic view. Now, this shows that Joe Biden's State of the Union, while it produced a positive result, more people were moved in a good way, he didn't muck it up. This isn't what you would call as a quote-unquote like 100% out of the park home run when it comes to the polling data. Now, this can exist for a bunch of different reasons. Number one, the State of the Union in 2024 is very different than the State of the Union in 1998. The type of partisanship that existed in the 1990s right after the victory in the Cold War during the Clinton eras, during, I don't know, I don't want to call it the ideological peat of Clintonism, neoliberal, whatever you want to call it, is very different than the partisanship that exists today. The type of heckling that was happening in the crowd, trying to throw off the president, is very different than what was culturally acceptable in 1998. In fact, during the Obama presidency, during, I believe, his 2012 State of the Union, I forget which State of the Union it was, a politician, one who's, by the way, actually working trying to get aid to Ukraine. He's a pro-Ukraine Republican, so it shows how these ideological divisions keep shifting and turning. He looked at Obama and shouted, "You lie," during his State of the Union, and it was a gigantic scandal. Now Marjorie Taylor Greene chimps out on the House floor, and it's just like, oh, it is what it is. It's like I've seen my cat throw up on the floor like a million times because, you know, that's what just cats do. At a certain point, it's just like, ugh. And that's what it's become. The first time I saw my cat throw up on the floor, I was like, oh, disgusting. The millionth time, it's like, ugh. And that's what it's like. Marjorie Taylor Greene took a big dump on the House floor. And I do think that has an impact on how the speech is perceived, but it's also becoming more acceptable. How much of an impact? It's impossible to measure. What I do think is probably a lot easier to measure is the fact that the people who tuned in, and so this is less speculative than the last suggestion, the people who tuned in are more bipartisan than usual. The data suggested that 30% of the people who tuned in were Republicans and 36% of the people who tuned in were Democrats. That is much more bipartisan, and of course, independents. That is much more bipartisan than on average for a State of the Union. So if in the 1998 State of the Union, more Democrats are tuning in than Republicans, but during today's State of the Union or yesterday's State of the Union, you're having a much more bipartisan crowd, then the fact that the polling data would look like this, or in fact, you could say that the polling data looks like this despite this fact, could be a positive indication for Joe Biden. I also need to put forward the idea that when you talk about like favorability for Joe Biden, or thinking the country is heading in the right direction, or all these different or just saying, oh, I had a positive view of the speech. Somebody could walk away from the speech and have even a negative view of it, but still come away with it thinking that Joe Biden is acute. In fact, if you listen to someone like Kevin McCarthy, who said this about Joe Biden in private, while talking to other Republicans, he says that Joe Biden is sharp. Joe Biden knows how to negotiate. He knows what he's doing. But of course, he doesn't agree with Joe Biden because he's a Republican. So somebody could have walked away from this being like, you know, I didn't agree with Joe Biden, or I only kind of agreed with Joe Biden. I agreed on some things. I agreed with him on IVF. I disagree with him on an assault weapons ban. Somebody could do that and still come away with the conclusion, actually, you know what? I think he's mentally competent enough to be president, or at least mentally competent enough to not be the other guy. And so this immediate polling data after the fact is only checking how people view the country and what direction it's headed in, how people viewed his speech, both of which had positive indicators, but it didn't measure how it changed the people who viewed the speech perception of his mental acuteness. And if Joe Biden can keep doing what he did at the State of the Union, but in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, in Minnesota, in Nevada, in Florida, in North Carolina, in Ohio, in Colorado, in New Mexico, if he can do this in those states and he can do it on a consistent basis, so it's not a State of the Union and then he goes away and he keeps doing speeches like he did today, the day after the State of the Union in suburban Pennsylvania, then that is a tempo that I think could be very challenging for Donald Trump to overcome. This isn't COVID anymore. There's not going to be that excuse. And it's something he should take advantage of that he didn't have the ability to as much last time. Now, I do want to talk about something else. And I want to talk about the response, because I didn't even get to finish the Republican response. And I flatly said I just didn't want to watch it. I didn't want to finish it. I walked away during it and I got a drink because I couldn't stand it. I couldn't stand it on, like, of course, a policy level, because it was hard to, listen to her say, like, oh, Joe Biden's abandoning our allies as somebody who supports Ukraine right now. It's, that's annoying, but I can deal with it. What I couldn't deal with was the fact that the whole thing felt very unnatural, very artificial. Like I was watching somebody try out for improv class for the first time, and she thought she was going to make it out on the Big Apple if she could just swing this one out of the park. And so she gave it all she had. And yeah, she certainly gave it all she had. But I walked away from it, and I was worried that my partisanship, because I'm not a big fan of the young senator from Alabama, I'm not a big fan of her party, and of course I thought Biden did a relatively okay job. And so I guess in my mind, I'm like, I just said Biden did a good job, and I said that she did a bad job and that she was creepy, but creepy isn't like something you can measure. Like if I can point to this data and I can say, hey, so it looks like most Americans who watched this think he did a good job. And we had bipartisan people watching this, indicating that this could be a winning message going into the campaign season, and we should view it as and so I'm thinking back to it, and I'm like, maybe I was not fair. Maybe I jumped the gun. Maybe my partisanship is getting in the way of my judgment. I don't want that to be the case. I want to make sure I give you guys good analysis. I'd be upfront about my partisanship, but I don't want it to cloud my judgment. It can be, the glasses at which I see this, but it cannot cloud it. And so then I watched it again, and then I was reassured. I reassured myself that I was not wrong, that no, she was creepy. Check this out.
That despite the current state of our union, our best days are still ahead. May God bless you, and may God continue to bless these United States of America.
Somebody did put horror music over it, by the way.
Mr. President, enough is enough. Innocent Americans are dying, and you only have yourself to blame. Fulfill your oath of office. Reverse your policies. End this crisis and stop the suffering. Mr. President.
Okay, so there's a bunch of reasons why I don't think this worked. I think it's weird that she's in her kitchen with no context. Most people don't know who she is. I hear she's a housewife. So the idea was like, oh, pro-family. At least that's what Tommy Tuberville was trying to sell it afterwards. By the way, I'm not in isolation here, and I know it's not partisan because I'm not the only one that thinks it was stupid. The official GOP, not the official GOPs, officials within the GOP also thought that it didn't look good. And this isn't just being reported by the Daily Beast, which can be a little bit like a rumor mill sometimes, but also by the Rolling Stone. What the hell am I watching? Republicans torch their own State of the Union rebuttal. Alabama Senator Christy Britt was panned after delivering the most bizarre State of the Union rebuttal in recent memory. In recent memory. Let me 1 second. What the hell am I watching right now? A Trump advisor asked mid Britt remarks. Creepy, one of the Republican pollsters noted. A lawyer working in the Trump orbit said the performance reminded them of public access television, and a senior House congressional aide remarked that it was cringe-inducing to watch and likely destined to be turned into a lame Saturday Night Live skit this weekend. I'll give Biden this. He at least gave a better speech than Christy Britt, one national Republican consultant said bluntly. Online, the reaction from conservative commentators was similar. I'm sure Katie Britt is a sweet mom in person, but this speech is not what we need. Charlie Kirk wrote formerly on X, formerly known as Twitter. Joe Biden just declared war on the American right. And Katie Britt is talking like she's hosting a cooking show, whispering about how Americans don't get it. I was talking about this while it was live. I was like, does she have like an ASMR mic right now?
I'm not Hank
I can
Hill,
hear
got a tier 2 subscription.
Hey, thank you so much for the tier 2 subscription. I'm not Hank Hill. It'd be, again, tier 2 is great. I appreciate it. It'd be much cooler if you were Hank Hill, though. Thank you so much for the tier 2 sub. But I was saying this yesterday, that it felt like she was whispering into the mic. I could feel her lips smacking on each other, and it felt like I clicked on one of. Sometimes I'll see one of those ASMR accounts on Twitch when I click it every once in a while, and I don't really watch other Twitch streams that often. Only my friends for like 30 minutes, 10 minutes. I just don't have the time. But every once in a while I'll click it on like an ASMR stream just because I'm curious, and then it'll feel like someone just stabbed me in the ear because it's like it's right in there, and I cringe. I take out my headphones and I click away. That's what it felt like. It was. Yeah. Anyway, I want to say, I think the big thing that hurt her, honestly, and I said this yesterday when I was talking to some people after the show, I think a lot of it was just how quickly she moved on from topic to topic. See, Joe Biden went through a whole range of emotions during this speech. He quipped, he made jokes, he got serious, he talked about death, he talked about a ton of things, but he went through all these different emotions. But he had 2 hours. She had like 20 minutes. And so it felt like, in a rush to try to give the performance of a lifetime, an Oscar-winning performance, she felt like she had to go through all the emotions, maybe. And in an effort to fit it all in, the transitions just looked very unnatural. It's like if I was to be like, God, my mother's death was so horrible. But God, the cherry tree, the transition didn't work. This clip right here that was clipped by Matt Lewis, I think shows it the best. I think this gets my point across quite well. Let me just turn up the volume so you guys can be sure to hear it. There you go.
I have imagined what my story would entail. To think about what the American dream can do across just one generation, in just one lifetime. It's truly breathtaking.
Wow.
But right now, the American dream has turned into a nightmare for so many families. The true, unvarnished state of our union begins and ends with this.
It's just way too, like, whoa, like that, the shift just happened so quick. It's unnatural. It's unnatural. It feels forced. Again, it felt like somebody's first improv trying to be dramatic to impress the teacher. That's what it felt like to me. That's what it felt like to me. Really bad response from the Republicans, and they know it. I will say, though, there was one, I think, educated, cogent, and honestly just like downright beautiful response from the Republicans. And in fact, it was from Donald Trump. I know I'm a big Trump critic, but I had to give him credit. This right here, I think, was my favorite response.
We're going to buy American. We're going to buy.
He posted this on Truth Social. This is his personal account.
America. So trade rules. Buy America has been the law since 1933. Also caps and won't even go into effect until 2025. And by the way, that law was written and the benefit expires in 2025. New electric grids that are able to weather major storms and not prevent those fires.
Man, he was born to post. He was born to post, not to lead.